You're crouched at a stream bank in what is now Wyoming, 20,000 years ago, filling a hide bag before the light goes. The wind has just died down, and with it, the rustle of the plains. You are holding a wooden spear with a flint tip, cutting-edge technology at the time, but suddenly it feels entirely useless. The smell hits you first, a thick stench of rotten meat and wet fur half a second before you hear the breathing. You turn. 11 feet of muscle and bone is standing on its hind legs 60 feet away, and it's already looking at you. Standing up, this animal's eyes are level with where you'd look up to see a basketball hoop. It hasn't decided yet if you're worth the effort. That leaves two questions worth asking. How terrifying were the things that used to hunt us? And how does something built like that go extinct? That's not an exaggeration for effect. In Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains, there is an 85-foot deep sinkhole known as Natural Trap Cave. For decades, researchers have been pulling out the remains of Ice Age predators that fell in over a span of 100,000 years. Among those radiocarbon-dated bones is Arctodus simus, the short-faced bear you just met. The fossil record doesn't just say these animals were big. It proves they stalked the exact same riverbanks where our ancestors knelt for water and prowled through the pitch-black caves where early humans desperately tried to sleep. When we think of the Ice Age, we tend to imagine humans as the undisputed apex predators. Brave hunters conquering mammoths with teamwork and fire. But the fossil record tells a much darker, much more vulnerable story. Look at the fossilized trackways discovered at White Sands National Park in New Mexico, dated back 23,000 years. We see the footprints of a human, likely a young woman, hurrying across the mud for a mile and a half. We know she was terrified because on her hip she was carrying a toddler. We can see where she briefly set the child down in the mud to rest. But what makes this site visceral? What makes it a horror story etched in stone are the tracks intersecting hers. Shortly after she passed, the massive footprints of a Columbian mammoth and the clawed tracks of a giant ground sloth cut directly across her path. The sloth tracks suddenly pivot and spin, rearing up on its hind legs to catch her scent. She was being stalked. For the vast majority of our history, humans were not the top of the food chain. We were on the menu. To understand how we survived, we have to look at the monsters that hunted us. And our first glimpse into this nightmare begins in the very caves our ancestors used for shelter. Deep inside River Bluff Cave, Paleolithic claw marks scar the limestone walls. They are deeply gouged, terrifyingly wide, and completely out of reach for any modern animal. They rest nearly 15 feet off the cave floor. They belonged to Arctodus simus, the giant, short-faced bear. If you stood face-to-face with a modern grizzly bear on its hind legs, you would be looking at its chest. If you stood in front of a short-faced bear on its hind legs, you would be staring at its knees. The average human is 1.7 meters. At its peak, this animal stood 12 feet tall and weighed close to 3,000 pounds. But its size wasn't the terrifying part, it was its skeleton. Unlike modern bears, which have a rolling, pigeon-toed gait built for foraging, the short-faced bear had elongated, straight-facing legs built for open sprints. Usain Bolt clocked a top speed of 27.7 miles per hour. Biomechanical models suggest the short-faced bear could sustain a dead sprint of 40 miles per hour. If an ancient human encountered one on the open plains of North America, running was a mathematical impossibility. Running from a bear on the open plains was hopeless. But finding refuge near the water offered its own unique horrors. Forget everything you know about crocodiles hiding in murky water. Meet Quinkana. Fossil beds in Queensland reveal a crocodilian with long, muscular legs positioned directly under its body, rather than splayed to the side. If you are chased by a modern crocodile on land, you can out-jog it easily. They tap out at around 11 miles per hour for very short bursts. Quinkana was an apex land runner. Worse, standard water crocodiles have conical teeth meant for grabbing and drowning. Quinkana had laterally compressed, serrated teeth, like a great white shark. It didn't drag early humans into the water to drown them, it chased them down on dry land and sliced them apart. Quinkana wasn't the only cold-blooded terror sprinting across early Australia. When the first Aboriginal Australians arrived on the continent around 50,000 years ago, they stepped into a prehistoric nightmare. Buried in the Narrakorde caves are the remains of a reptile that defies logic, Megalania. This was the largest venomous lizard to ever walk the earth. To understand the stakes, we have to look at its closest living relative, the Komodo dragon. A modern Komodo tops out at around 10 feet and 150 pounds. A modern human bitten by a Komodo dragon suffers immediate blood pressure drop and paralysis due to venom glands in the lower jaw. Megalania was up to 23 feet long and weighed 1,000 pounds. It was effectively a school bus-sized crocodile that hunted on land. Evidence shows its jaw was lined with serrated, blade-like teeth, backed by massive venom glands. One grazing bite to an early human wouldn't just cause a traumatic wound, the venom would send them into rapid hemorrhagic shock. You didn't have to be devoured by Megalania to die, you just had to be scratched. To escape these massive ground-dwelling titans, early humans might have instinctively sought the safety of the canopy, but the trees were already taken. As we speed back further into human evolution, we find a predator specifically tailored to kill us. In the Swartkrans caves, anthropologists found the fossilized skulls of our early hominid ancestors. Multiple skulls featured two distinct, perfectly circular puncture wounds at the back of the head. They matched the fangs of Dinofelis, the false saber-tooth cat. While true saber-tooths hunted massive herbivores, Dinofelis was built differently. A modern jaguar achieves a massive bite force of around 1,500 pounds per square inch, relying on blunt, brute force pressure to slowly crack and crush the skulls of its prey. Dinofelis didn't need 1,500 pounds per square inch, it had superior hardware. It possessed stout, dagger-like fangs, shorter, and far thicker than a true saber-tooth's. Instead of just squeezing a skull until it fractured, Dinofelis' jaws were biomechanically calibrated to drive those twin spikes directly through the bone of a primate cranium in a single surgical strike. It was a stealth ambush predator that dropped from trees at night, and we were its specialty. Even if our ancestors managed to outsmart the hunters on the ground and survive the terrors in the trees, they still had to watch the skies. We end with a terror so recent, it is recorded in the oral histories of the Maori people, the Pauakai, or Haast's eagle. Evidence in the form of deeply pierced moa bones proves the horrifying strike force of this bird, confirming what the legends said. It was more than capable of snatching up humans. The strongest grip of a human hand is around 100 pounds per square inch. Haast's eagle struck its prey at speeds of 50 miles per hour. Its talons were the size of a modern tiger's claws, delivering over 1,000 pounds per square inch of crushing force. Striking from above, it was the equivalent of a cinder block being dropped on a human head from a 10-story building equipped with razor blades. So, if these predators were perfectly evolved to outrun, outbite, and outmaneuver us, why are we here and they are in museums? This is where the story pivots. Welcome to the greatest murder mystery in paleontology, the Pleistocene extinction. For decades, the debate has raged violently between two camps. One side argues for climate change. Ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica show that at the end of the last ice age, the planet didn't warm gradually. It spiked violently. Ecosystems collapsed, forests turned to grasslands, and massive herbivores starved. When the giant herbivores died, the hyper-specialized predators that relied on them starved right alongside them. But the other side argues the overkill hypothesis, and the evidence is damning. If you plot the extinction dates of global megafauna on a map, the die-offs track perfectly with human migration routes. When humans entered Australia 50,000 years ago, Megalania and Quinkana vanished. When humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas 15,000 years ago, the short-faced bear disappeared. We stopped being prey, and we became an invasive species. We didn't fight these monsters one-on-one. We used coordinated pack tactics, we weaponized fire, we invented atlatls to strike from a distance, and we hunted their food sources to extinction. The truth of our survival is likely a brutal combination of both changing skies and human weaponry. But looking back at the fossil record, one thing is absolutely clear. These monsters did not just populate our early nightmares, they forged our collective survival, they tested our primitive ingenuity, and they became the first casualties of our ruthless rise to power. So, back to that stream bank in Wyoming, the 11-foot animal deciding whether you're worth the effort. It let you go. 10,000 years later, its entire species didn't get the same chance. Thanks for watching Flint World. If research back to prehistory is your thing, subscribe. There are more of these I haven't even gotten to yet.